Late at night, Nick is driving home with his son Brendan. As they pass through a dangerous part of the city, they see two cars coming toward them with their headlights off. Confused, Nick flashes his lights to signal them to turn on their headlights. A few minutes later, their car runs low on gas, so Nick stops at a nearby gas station. Brendan goes inside to buy a drink while Nick stays outside and calls his wife Helen. Suddenly, the same two cars pull into the station. A group of masked gang members jump out and rush into the store to rob it. Inside, the store owner tries to grab his gun, but one of the gang members sees him and shoots him dead. It quickly becomes clear this isn't just a robbery. The gang is forcing a new member, a young man named Joe, to kill someone as part of his initiation. Brendan, standing at the wrong place at the wrong time, becomes the chosen victim. Joe hesitates, but after the gang yells at him, he finally steps forward and cuts Brendan's throat with a machete. Nick hears the commotion and runs inside. What he sees leaves him frozen, his son lying in a pool of blood. The gang runs out, but Nick tackles the one who attacked Brendan. During the struggle, he pulls off the attacker's mask and sees his face. But Joe escapes and runs into the street, where he's hit by a car. Nick, in shock, ignores everything else and rushes Brendan to the hospital. Doctors try to save him, but it's too late. Brendan dies from his injuries, and Nick's life is shattered in a single night. The next morning, Nick sits in silence at the police station, trying to hold himself together. Detective Wallace asks him to identify Brendan's killer in a lineup. Nick doesn't hesitate. He points directly at Joe, the young man who murdered his son. Later, Nick and Helen attend Brendan's funeral. Helen tries to stay strong for their other son, Lucas, but the whole family is heartbroken. At home, they keep watching old videos of Brendan, struggling to believe that he's really gone. Later, the district attorney explains to Nick that the evidence is weak. The gas station security camera wasn't working, and there are no witnesses to confirm what happened. So, without strong proof, Joe might only serve a few years in prison. Nick can't believe what he's hearing. His son was murdered, and the killer might be free in just a few years. At the pre-trial hearing, the judge asks Nick to testify. He looks at Joe, then pauses. In a shocking move, Nick lies. He tells the court he couldn't clearly see the attacker's face that night. Because of this, the judge has no choice but to drop the case. Outside the courthouse, Joe lights a cigarette, smug and confident. Moments later, his gang pulls up and celebrates his release. Their leader, Billy, Joe's older brother, congratulates him. But what they don't realize is that Nick is sitting in his car nearby, watching everything. Justice has failed him, so now he's going to get it his own way. He quietly follows the gang from a distance. After finding out where they live, he heads back home. That night, he takes a knife and slips it into his pocket. He tells Helen he forgot something at the office and needs to go back, but he's not going to the office. He's going hunting. Nick drives to the rundown apartment building where the gang lives. He parks nearby and waits, watching carefully. However, a woman notices Nick and becomes suspicious, yet she leaves without saying a word. After hours of waiting, Nick finally sees Joe stepping outside. When Joe returns inside, Nick walks straight up to him. Then, a violent fight breaks out. Nick pins him down, and during the struggle, Joe gets stabbed and dies on the spot. Nick immediately pulls the knife out and drives away. He stops by a river, tosses the knife into it, and then drives home. At home, Helen notices his injured hand. Confused and worried, she bandages it. Nick says little and heads off to take a shower. Meanwhile, Billy finds out Joe is dead. Furious, he storms into the gang's hideout. His men are drinking and laughing, but Billy shuts them up fast. He wants to know who killed his brother. Then one of them says his sister saw a man in a suit near the scene of Joe's murder. Later, she recognizes that same man in a newspaper photo. It's Nick. Now Billy knows who killed his brother, and he's determined to get revenge. The next day, while walking through the city, Nick suddenly senses that someone is following him. It's Bodie, one of Billy's men, tailing him. As Bodie pulls out a gun, Nick quickly turns and knocks him back with a suitcase. Immediately, Billy and the gang open fire in the middle of the street. People scream and scatter as bullets fly. Nick runs through alleyways, dodging gunshots. He throws his suitcase to move faster. Behind him, Billy is screaming like an animal. Nick dashes through buildings, across staircases, until he ends up in a multi-level parking garage. He sets off car alarms to confuse his pursuers, then climbs higher. Finally, Nick reaches the top level where his car is parked. Just as he's about to get in, a gang member appears. Nick manages to disarm him, and the fight spills into a nearby car. As they struggle, the car begins rolling backward. Nick kicks at the windshield until it starts to crack. He then traps the gang member with the seatbelt and leaps out through the shattered windshield just in time, while the gang member crashes over the edge and falls to his death. Nick then gets into his own car and quickly drives away, disappearing disappearing from the scene. The next day, Bodhi walks into Nick's office and gives him his suitcase before security throws him out. Inside the suitcase, Nick finds a photo of his whole family with red marks drawn over their faces. Worried, he turns the photo over and sees a phone number written on the back. When Nick calls the number, Billy answers. He tells Nick that by killing his brother, he has given his family a death sentence, and now he's coming for them. Then Billy hangs up. Nick immediately calls home and tells Helen and Lucas to stay inside. Then he quickly calls Detective Wallace and begs for protection. Wallace agrees and sends 2 officers to guard the house. Nick then rushes home, locking every door and shutting every window. That night, a car alarm suddenly blares outside. Nick looks out the window and freezes. The 2 officers meant to protect them are lying dead, and the gang is already inside. Gunshots explode through the house. Nick fights back, managing to wound a few of them, but it's not enough. The gang captures Nick's family, and Billy shoots them right in front of him. Afterward, Billy turns the gun on Nick and shoots him too. A few days later, Nick wakes up in a hospital bed. Detective Wallace tells him the terrible news. His wife is dead, and his son is in a coma, barely alive. Nick goes to his son's room. He leans close and whispers an apology, saying he's sorry for failing him. Wallace watches Nick closely, but he is already thinking about what to do next. He asks her for some time alone with his son, and she agrees to wait outside. As soon as she leaves, Nick sneaks out of the hospital through a window. Nick goes home, changes his clothes, and calls a co-worker for help tracing the phone number he used to contact Billy. By morning, Nick withdraws all his money from the bank, preparing for revenge. Later, his co-worker calls back and tells him the phone number is linked to a bar. Nick goes straight to the bar. Inside, he talks to the bartender and shows him a stack of cash. He wants 2 things: the gang's location and someone who can sell him weapons. Nick gets both: Billy's location and the name of a man called Bones. Nick finds Bones and buys a double-barreled shotgun, a Colt .45, a .357 revolver, and boxes of ammo. But as Nick turns to leave, Bones points a gun at him. He tells Nick that he is Billy's father and asks what Nick plans to do. Nick calmly says he is going to kill Billy. To Nick's surprise, Bones lowers his gun and lets him go because even he believes Billy has gone too far. Back at home, Nick begins to prepare. He checks the guns, reloads, and practices until the motions become natural. After shaving his head, Nick heads toward the gang's hideout. Meanwhile, Billy is at another location on business. When he hears that Nick is still alive and coming for them, he becomes furious and prepares to go back and kill Nick himself. But before he can leave, Bones finds him and warns him to stop before things get worse. Billy doesn't listen. He pulls out a gun and shoots his own father. At the gang's hideout, Nick arrives and sees a van parked outside with a lookout sitting inside. Without hesitation, Nick rams the van at full speed, splitting it in half and killing the man inside. Nick storms into the building with his shotgun ready. He moves carefully, checking room after room. The first gang member doesn't even have time to raise his gun before Nick blasts him away. The next man runs out of bullets and tries to escape, but Nick chases him and shoots him. 2 more thugs come from the hallway. Nick runs upstairs, reloading as he moves. From the upper floor, he spots one of them below and shoots him in the leg. Meanwhile, Billy arrives and enters the building. When he sees the dead bodies, he starts to feel afraid. In one of the rooms, a gang member hides behind a wall. Nick sees his shadow and shoots through the drywall, killing the man. Nick is getting tired, but keeps pushing forward. Suddenly, Billy steps out and shoots Nick in the side. Nick fires back with his shotgun and hits Billy in the chest. Both men are badly wounded, but still alive. Then Bodhi appears from behind and shoots Nick in the neck. Nick quickly turns and shoots Bodhi in the head, killing him instantly. Now only Nick and Billy are left. Both are out of bullets. They sit across from each other, covered in blood. Billy looks at Nick and says, "Look what I made you. You look like one of us now." Nick says nothing. He quietly reaches into his jacket and pulls out his last weapon, a .357 revolver. Billy sees the gun and realizes it's over. As the sun rises, Nick slowly walks out of the building, badly wounded, holding a bloody bandage to his neck. He gets into Billy's Mustang and drives home. Nick parks the stolen Mustang, steps out, and drags his injured leg toward his house. Barely able to stand, he enters his empty home and turns on the TV. A home video plays. It shows Brendan, Lucas, Helen, and Nick smiling and singing. A life that is now gone. Nick sits on the couch, staring at the screen. Moments later, Detective Wallace enters and sees him. She tells Nick that Lucas is waking up from the coma. However, Nick doesn't answer. He just stares at the screen, watching the memories of a life that slipped away. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any of our future content.